Okay, awesome. So the first thing I want to share is that your experience with me will be like it's 2020 and we're in April. So we're gonna go back because when I share, it's gonna be like, wait, I'm gonna share my screen and then I'm gonna hit percent and then I'm gonna, it's gonna be like this every time. So just bear with me because it just makes it spicy. That's just the way my brain is. So it's a little bit of a throwback experience. Enjoy it because we all need to be um, reminded of what we felt like in 2020, of course. And that's it. And so before I do the fair share, has anybody ever been to like a sales conference or like a social media or like a branding challenge or anything like that? Has any, or like a professional services? No. Okay. Here's the thing about those. They always sell out. They're always full. You tell somebody that you're going to teach them to make more money and they will fork out $25,000 and $5,000 and they will show up. They will get a sitter, they will travel, they would do all of the things. I have been one of those people, so I know. It doesn't really happen when it comes to things like self-directed learning or gentle parenting or anything that it's like community related, community building, right? Let's protect our forest and it'll be 3 people on a Saturday. So the fact that we're here, the fact that you're here, that you have signed up, it's already counterculture. So whatever you have gotten, whatever we were going to get, already, like if you can just hold yourself and give yourself a little embrace because you're already doing the work. We're already doing the work. And what I think, and I'll share this at the end, every single morning that I wake up, I say to myself, and not just if I tell you how often I say this to myself during the day, you will think that I am a little. So I won't say how many times I say it, but I do say it at least 3 times, and definitely in the morning. And I tell myself, what are we going to do with all this future every morning? And whenever I'm hitting a roadblock and things feel a little bit, that's my reframe. Right? And so we're already doing, because if we don't do that, then we will see the mess in the world. And it's easy to get sucked into helplessness. And so I am always in the process of creating space between myself and helplessness. That's a core value. And this framework that I am sharing in this life that we're all leaning into in our different ways, I believe that creates, I believe that creates, what is the question that I ask myself? Is that, what are we going to do with all this future? um, and so this SDE, our home culture, these are the things that make me feel hopeful, and that I think will provide a lot of answers for us. So let's just thank ourselves for being here and for showing up. So, you know, if at any point there's a message during the day that's just like, I'm not doing enough, or what didn't I do? What didn't I achieve? Like you got up and you answered. Yeah, exactly. I'm creating space between myself and helplessness. Yeah, all the time. So let me open this up and share it. And this is the work that I have been doing for the last 2 years. I also do a lot of, so I do two pieces of work. One is this, And the other is, this is where I get weird with the sharing. We'll see. How to support both direct instruction. Did y'all see that? Oh, I didn't even get it all the way wrong. I'm so excited. Um, so how do we both do, how do we teach children, young people, how to read and write well when they need explicit learning, explicit instruction, and still embody self-directed learning and respect personhood? So that's one of the pieces that I work on. And also how to, like, where are our young people learning criticality and to see literacy as a tool for liberation, if not in our home environments? And how do we do that and still respect um, their self-directed process? And so that's one of my offers. But this is the Center to Center. And I love this, and I'll share a framework for decentering school at home to center home culture in our divine assignment. And I share it with both parents, households, families that are already leaning into self-directed learning, but also conventional schooling, and they're trying to make that transition. And one of the reasons that I wanted to share it in this community is because we all know those people, right? We're all in community with people who are still participating in conventional schooling systems, and we want to like bring them in, right? We want to be like, come to this side, there's a lot of light. And so in using this framework, we obviously can use it for ourselves, but there's some language that we're able to share. And what are we here for if not to enrich our home culture, but also our friends, family, neighbors, followers? Because this life experience is collective, right? It's like, you know, it's not just what's good for us, not that we're imposing, but it is about sharing. So that's it. And I always want to give my son a shout out because I was helping and walking a lot of families that were doing the transition from exiting conventional school systems. And for the majority of it, Black and Brown families that were leaving that school system because they had educational trauma or an experience, a violent experience. And so how do we would transition into homeschooling? And while they were coming to me, I was just like, not only are we going to homeschool and get the children or the young people out of there, here's this whole other thing. And that feels really scary. It feels really scary to ask people or to invite people to center their humanity, their children's humanity, when they have been dehumanized all of their lives. That is a really hard ask. And so there's a lot of healing that needs to happen in that work. And so I've been doing that for 8 years. But then during the pandemic, my son was sharing with a lot of his friends, and he was just like, Mom, I realize now that I'm getting into my preteens that the relationship that we have is really different than, because now they had a lot of time. He was just like, I see how my friends engage with learning, and I see how my friends engage with their parents and how they engage with each other. And it's really different than what goes on in our world. And it's really different than even what goes on with my unschooling friends, my SDE friends. And he's like, so what happens to them? Do they just never experience? Do they never experience acceptance? Do they never experience like learning and not being scared that it's about like they want an approval and a grade? Do they like that thing that happens between like your relationship with learning, and also your relationship with your parent, with the person that takes care of you. Do they just never experience it? Can this just be for everyone? So even though I had these frameworks in place, it was him and his desire to have his peers who were attending school experience the then what? The home centering the center of humanity. He was just like, how do we share this with everybody? So he gets all of that credit, because really centering humanity is for everyone. And so here's the framework that I've created. The first piece is we have to decenter. And school has become our center. And when I say school, it's not just the building of school, but metrics, performance, right? And a lot of us from inside of the community, we understand that, right? Our output. And it's centered within ourselves, right? We're grappling with our value as humans, how to, always measured in success, always measured in productivity. I remember once when I was going to go home and I had my son was already born, I was already homeschooling, I was already doing SDE. And at the time, I didn't have like any deals, any projects, and going on like nothing. Like it was just, I was working actually is when I realized that my son was neurodiverse. And we were that year, in my, I don't know if you all are familiar with this term, but in my family, we have a rallying cry. And so a rallying cry is where we examine it quarterly, and who right now needs to be focused on. Who do we need to rally around? And so it could be different things. It could be, like I said, if my partner just lost a contract and he really needs to spend some time really looking for other work, right? Then that's going to be, we all talk about it in my house. And then that's going to be, he probably will help out less in the household for the next quarter. One quarter, my daughter, she really wanted to learn how to ride a bike. And so she became our rallying cry. And we do this in circle in my house. We examine this every quarter. And so that means that someday, at some point during the day, somebody, her brother, my partner, or I, somebody needed to be outside in the street helping her ride her bike, because that was the rallying cry. So we do have that as a practice in our home. And so my son was going to do cognitive training, and actually that rallying cry lasted for almost a year, but we're very grateful that we were able to do it. And I had to take him in from my neighborhood into this whole other neighborhood that was an hour commute. And then I was stuck in traffic. And then it was literally 6 hours of training was costing me about 16 hours of like going back and forth. And so that was time that was taken away from other things in the household, but he was our rallying cry for those 8 months. So then the holidays came by and I was just like, I can't go visit my parents. Like I can't go home. And I could not understand why I was feeling so anxious about going home to visit my family. And I realized it was this. I did not have a thing to talk about. So when people are like, what are you doing lately? I have absolutely no going, like all I do every day and like every week is just drive my son to cognitive therapy, right? All I have is these babies. And then I was like, oh, I have decentered my humanity, and I have just centered schooling, performance, right? And I had to, so this is what we have become. our households have become containers of productivity. And it happens even in SDE, because my son was telling me, sometimes when we meet in these unschooling groups, or when I see these Instagram pages, it's like you almost have to prove to people that this works. And so you have to be more artistic, or more this or more that, or have this project, or really be good at robotics. It's like, I don't know. I don't want to, I'm not building a structure. I'm not doing the things. And so schooling as center is about understanding that often performance, and that at home we have centered, we have reduced, this culture has reduced what is our home unit or our community unit to a holding space for future or evidence of productivity. And we have to acknowledge that and revisit it and realize this is what's happening. And then heal and reframe is, once you see it, what do you do with it? It's programming. And I'm here to share with you, friends, and I'll go through the framework, is that we can believe in SDE all we want, and we can be like the most unschoolers of them all. And the programming is there. So sometimes we understand that we know how to do all the things, we're like in our frontal cortex, but then we don't understand why the stuff keeps coming up. And it's because we are not centering humanity. And part of the humanity is how neuroscience works, how our brains work. So when we have programming in our brainstem, when we have programming in our bodies, when we have programming in our like temporal lobe that has given meaning to us when we were children, right? If we already have those programs in there, when we're in positions of stress and feeling rejected, like we're going to tap into those programs. And so it is very important for us to understand that part of centering our humanity is to understand, I have some programs. There's a way that my brain works. How do I access that? How do I heal? How do I accept that that's there? And how do I go about reframing that? So the heal and reframe is important. The other thing is that part of our humanity is humans need an identity. It's just what it is. And so when we, for a gazillion years, particularly when we were young, right, we were given this identity around school and performance and acceptance. So we all experienced it as hardwired. And not only is it hardwired from us, we also carry some brainstem information from our parents. And it's a beautiful thing when you think about evolution, is that here we are, these animals, right? And we eat from this tree and we get sick. And this is why we have been able to access, to develop this beautiful frontal lobe, is that we have developed this ability to actually record information and pass it down. It's really awesome, because we would not be able to be sitting here in 2023 with this beautiful access to this frontal lobe that's like able to think of all of these beautiful things if every single generation that was born would have to eat from the same tree and get sick, right? No, we actually pass information on. And so at some point, some of our ancestors ate from a tree, everybody got sick, record that information, gets passed on to the brainstem, and then now you don't even have appetite for that tree. I don't know how anybody dug up a sweet potato and put it in some water and made it make it into something that we could eat. Pretty amazing stuff that as human beings or there's a bush and you can take it and heat it and grind it and put some yeast in it and then you make bread. How does it even happen, right? So it's a beautiful thing that we can pass down information, record it in our brainstem, and then the next generation doesn't need to. We develop instinct through gazillion years, right? But that's part of our evolutionary process and experience. And some of that, because of the 120 years of schooling, has gotten passed down. So understand that it's there, right? And access some healing. At the same time, access some reframe. So we need identity. And in order for us to feel safe, if we're not going to have this identity, we need some other identity, right? And so start to reframe it and give yourself a new identity so that then you can embody it. And then you won't feel so, like, a lot of the times the reason that we're reverting back into the schoolish thing is because, one, we haven't accessed the healing, but also you have to insert a new identity so that you can feel safe. And now that you have a new identity, then you can be like, okay, and then what? And then you can start embodying the processes. That's how you regulate your central nervous system, because you're saying, hey, I see the trauma. I see it. I'm holding space for it. We're going to constantly heal and understand it. We're also going to reframe, give ourselves a new identity, and now we're going to practice. And so this is the decenter to center framework. In the wise words of Jay-Z, you can't heal what you won't reveal. And so this, for a lot of us, so this is the first question, and a lot of us, again, in this community, already have asked ourselves that question, but let's continue to excavate and ask of it. Just like me going to my parents and being like, what am I doing? Like, why do I want to go? Well, am I being a parent to myself, right? Am I being a human being, or am I being a productivity agent, right? So sometimes we can do it for our children, sometimes for ourselves in this moment. And when we're talking to people that have not made the transition into SDE, we can, like, in a non-accusatory way, in an invitation, and say, like, are we parenting? Are we nurturing? Are we guiding? Or are we being containers for schools and systems? Right? These are some examples. I'm just going to run through these really quickly because they're really helpful, particularly when we have people in our lives that haven't embraced this. But it's like, hey, you've been away from your child all day, or a young person. What's the first thing that you ask or think about? For me, it's like, I just want to hug around people, or I just want to connect, but for a long time, it was just like, what you do? Like, are we focusing on the doing? Do we want to see the evidence? And this happens whether or not we're in SDE or in conventional schooling, or with our partners. How was work? How was work? Then have you centered the work, or have you centered the partner, or have you centered the human, right? Do you feel proud and a sense of self-worth when your children do well in school, or even an SDE project, or when you're like, oh, they're so self-directed? And that's affirming your decision to choose self-directed education, right? Do you feel shame or fear when they're not, right? When they're not in flow, it's really affirming when they're in flow. Sometimes not so affirming when they're not, right? It can be. And so do we feel shame or fear around that? And you have to name it, because if you don't name it, not to the world, not to Instagram, to yourself, then we're like, okay, there's a reason why that's there. So name it so that you can heal. Do you find yourself withholding or showing affection or approval based on that school related, or just performance in general, or have you done it in the past? And if you've done it in the past, this is just because you've changed. If you have not repaired it, that programming is still there for your young person. So just because you're like, we have seen the light, and we're like, oh no, we don't do that anymore. Have we repaired it? It's important, because in the future, or moment to moment, your young person is still operating that brainstem. That messaging, particularly the younger they were, is still there. And so can we name it so that we can insert some healing into it? the same thing, have we prioritized one thing or the other? Um, have we used emotional, physical, verbal violence or coercion to get our children to perform? Even if it is like, I need you to find your flow. What are your self-interests? What are you interested in? Can we do this thing? Okay. Have we ever done that? Do we engage in that? And there's no shame in that. Like, it just is. We just have to name it. We have to name it. And then we have to do that excavation work. Like, I'm naming it. I know better, right? This is the identity that I want to have. And yet there's a little bit of a disconnect or a big disconnect between the identity that I want to embody and then the things that I'm doing. That's a running program. That's a corrupt program. So you have to name it so that we can access it and heal it. I've heard people even within our community where they're like, he just wasn't good at school. That wasn't a system that he was thriving in, or he wasn't good at math. And so now I'm like, he's an artist. Like, what are these labels? Like, what are they? Who said? Right? And so again, some of that could be we're trying to affirm something ourselves, because as children we went through this school system where we had to put everything in categories. That was part of our experience, and therefore without referencing that experience, we feel lost, because that experience was our compass as children. As young people, it became a part of our programming, and now we're still running on it. We're still running on that script. So naming those things. Do you defend school values, curriculum, metrics as logical, optimal, linear? Even when we're like, oh, well, I have to do this because this is going to get them success. I have to do this because this is like, as if we control any of those things. Have you? Do you? Do you? Maybe you don't do it externally or publicly because it goes against what we say that we believe in, but internally, are you doing that still? So those are questions. When you say these things out loud, how does that feel? If you say it out loud, how does it feel? Would you post that? Would you tell a friend? Would you say it in a group and you're like, I would never say that around some people because they would be like, oh, we don't do that. Right? It goes, well, like, acknowledge it, say it, write it down, because that means that that programming is still there. And that's an invitation to heal. It's saying, you know what, I still believe that program is still somewhere there. There's a disconnect between my program, my script, and the identity that I want to embody. And rather than walk around with shame because I have it, I have an opportunity to say, it doesn't feel good. It's not aligned with my identity. Let me go in there and heal it. Right? We understand that centering school is not without consequence. So I'm always going back and grounding that it causes separation between siblings. It causes separation between parents and caregivers. It causes separation between selves. There's financial and life costs. There's unhealthy causal relationships. There's this is a thing that we want to disrupt. Like, the reason that I share like it's not without consequence is because our brains want to keep us safe. That's its job. And so sometimes we tap into these programs because the program is like, but this is what you know, and it will keep you safe. And we have to consciously say, does it really? Am I causing an unhealthy causal connection? Is this causing separation? So we have to consciously remind ourselves, not through judgment, not through shame, but remind ourselves that we're taking on this new identity and these new practices because the program did not keep us safe. Your brain thinks that those things will keep you safe and we'll come back to them. Examining our assumptions and daring to tell the truth is how we protect our young people And I mean, our young people, our children, and ourselves. Refusing to do so is what puts us in harm's way. And we have to tell that we are wired to want to protect young people. We are wired to want to protect our children. This is just nature. We can't be like so evolved that we forget that we're humans and we have nature. And so um, we're like, no, 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 no. Let me just remind you that examining our assumptions and daring to tell them the truth is actually how we protect. It's actually love. It's actually like refusing to do this work is what will put them in harm's way. And when we center that piece of our humanity, then we're like, oh, okay, I feel safe. Then your brain is like, okay, you're not putting your children in harm's way. You can access your frontal cortex. Where are the things that you learned at SDE Weekend? Let's put them into practice, right? We have to continue to do this work and bring ourselves back to safety. So exercise one, this is what I do with families, but can you think of a time when your parents and your caregivers or your school teachers lied and sent your school over your humanity or the truth? What the impact that I have? And this is something that you just do on your own. I do it all the time. Even 8 years into doing this work, I'm still like, I'll still find stuff. Yesterday doing the intuition exercise, when it was like, when was the time where your intuition, where you felt, I forget the prompt, but it was just like, when was it in childhood, like interrupted, your intuition interrupted, something along those lines? I remember that I was a toddler when somebody was just like, your intuition is wrong, essentially. And so think about that. And I remember as a young person, I'll share this quickly. I remember when I was in 5th grade, opening like clear as day, going through my locker. I had like this combination lock, and I opened it, and I just had this feeling like middle school is not as hard as this teacher in my 4th grade just drilled me and scared me for the last year. And I was like, the fact that the teachers scared us into what was going to happen in middle school, and my mom co-signed it, I was just like, mental note. I remember that day. And then years later, I remembered having the same feeling about 6 months into 9th grade. And I was just like, did this just happen again? Did I just come into high school and I just realized I spent the last 8 years really, really scared about what was going to happen in high school? And it's just more school. Nothing's happening, right? And then later on, I was always really good at school. And later on in 10th grade, I had this roster because I was like student council president. And I said something about the record because I had gotten caught helping a friend cheat in 6th grade. And they were like, this is going to go on your record. And I said something about a record, and they're like, there's no discipline record for any student. Like, what record are you talking about? And I just realized I have carried this fear about this blemish on my record that I just knew people had. And what happened to me, I graduated at 16. So I was really, really young in 10th grade. What was that? Yeah. Hold on. My daughter wants to say. Okay. So at 14 years old, I realized that adults, both my mother, which my parent caregiver, and school caregivers were willing to lie to me, to manipulate me. And at that point, I stopped trusting adults. Now, I graduated at 16 and went to University of Chicago from Puerto Rico. Had no family. Can I just tell y'all, I suffered a lot in my life because at 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, I did not have and I did not trust adults in my life that could have given me guidance, that could have worked from being scammed out of money to credit to being in a domestic violence situation. Because no matter what I did, I would not go. I would not seek counsel from other people who knew more. because I had had this experience that told me as a young person, adults around me will co-conspire to shame me and manipulate me. And so I lost trust in them. Um, we don't want that, right? We don't want that. And so telling the truth and leaning into telling our stories and leaning into relationship over everything, it's important. It's important. So how have you repeated those same patterns? When you see them, like jot them down, right? Think of those things, and whatever they come to you, ask of yourself, ask your subconscious, ask your personhood in your meditative space, like, I need to remember these things so that I can rewire, right? Read them aloud. How do they feel? Somebody was one of my clients, she said, you know what, I always did really well in school. And I had this teacher that was really, really always, I was like class pet. And I got all of these great grades. And so she always saw herself as a good student. She was like, but I am anxious all the time. And I said, well, how did it feel? And then she keeps telling me her story. And she's like, I had the same teacher, kindergarten, first, and second grade. And I was her teacher's pet. And I was like, so how did it feel for you to do well and get her approval? But then for other children, how did it feel to witness her treat? She was approving of you, but how did it feel to witness other children not get that approval or be shamed or not do so well? And she was like, well, it's interesting because I was very aware. And I was like, okay, well, then at your brainstem level, you're like, I'm good at performing, but I have to perform because I know what happens. Every single day that you were picked as teacher's pet, you were also saying there were other, like, if I don't do this, I know what will happen. I will be rejected. I will be punished. I will be put out. I will be shamed. And so even though you were being affirmed, you were also experiencing in your body what will happen if you did not uphold this thing. And because of that, that was having an effect, an impact at the brainstem level. And so, yeah, exactly. That is fun. And so she's like, oh, I'm like, so write it down so that we can do something else with it. So what do we do with these experiences? Well, what I invite, and this is like, I won't go into, I share with people, parents, caregivers, different healing modalities. And the same thing when you do with your children, right? With the young people, whatever happened before and you're repairing, you're like, let's access it, right? So one of my favorites is visualization. And you're like, and I tell people, I have such a healthy childhood now, but it's because I have revisualized all of my childhood. And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I'm so hopeful, but it's because like in my mind, I've created like, I have so many memories of being centered as a child that I'm like walking around with this brain that just feels really healthy. And even though I know that that's not what's happened, but that's a beautiful thing. It says like, I don't even know anymore, but that's a beautiful thing because the more that you can imagine yourself in those spaces, like what if my teacher had told me middle school is not going to be that hard and teachers will still work with you and like all of those things, right? What if my mother had said, you know what, you don't need to finish the spelling test. Like just go to sleep if you're tired. Like I have imagined, reimagined pretty much, I have asked of myself to remember all of the things, even the painful ones, because I want the opportunity to visualize and feel in my body how, like, the alternative, right? And I have seen my mother be caring for me. And I have seen somebody, like, my mom went into that school and she was just like, you know what? She did not want her friend to be beaten because he would be if he failed this test. What can we do to help Keith, right? Like I imagine my mother advocating for myself and for Keith in that fifth grade biology classroom and really like going at this white man teacher that was like a bear over me and shame me and be like, that's not what's going to happen. That's not how you respond. And then I imagine him like really responding to my mother and apologizing and creating a circle. I've done that work, right? So that I can walk around and feel safe. So give yourself that gift. Because the more that you do it, the less that programming will pop up. As we dare to tell and move in truth, we will fall in alignment, and our needs to control fear and anxieties can be released. But we cannot neglect the healing. The healing is essential. So confront your top biggest fears, write them down, ask why, ask again, who taught you that? Same thing that happened to me. Like I had a big fear of going to see my family and not having a project. I'm like, oh, because like I have a lot of evidence, right? I have a lot of evidence that told me my family cares about my achievements. And then I have a lot of evidence of them like being dismissive of just having children and not having a child. Like there is evidence. There's a reason that that fear was there, right? So I named it. And then I revisualized, and then I showed up. And guess what happened? They were just happy to see me. They were just happy to see me. Oh, when I said, you know what, for the last 8 months, I've just been focusing on taking Nicholas to his cognitive training, and it takes about 20 hours, and we're really excited about it. And, I did not mention one thing other than that. And people were really interested, right? It was a story that I had told myself. And even if they hadn't, because I had done the healing work, it wouldn't really have mattered, right? It was just nice that they cared. And that surprised me. So that could be it. Sometimes it's just like, I remember one time I was like reverting into schoolish behavior, and I had my friend come over and she's like, this is just like so unlike you. You're like, where's this coming from? I'm like, I'm just scared that somebody will come and take him away. Right? What if he doesn't have evidence of learning? Like, we're Black. Like, people will come take your children. And then it was just like, oh, where did I learn that? I have evidence of that in my family. Like, I have seen it happen, right? I have a neighbor, I have a friend. We all told a story, like not necessarily because of homeschooling, but like the trauma of people like child protective services coming and like being policing your experience as a Black parent is real, right? And so I remember being at home by myself and being scared because my mother was working, and just like turning off the lights and pretending I'm there because nobody can know that I'm there by myself, because CPS can come and does like because of all of these things. Okay, so now I understand why. I have a fear of CPS taking my children. Where did it come from? Name it. I have a fear of them being poor. Okay, why is this scary? Right? I've experienced poverty. Is school the way to like break each, right? Have upward mobility and like learn about money? No, okay, but I have to name it. We have to name it, and we have to write it down and do this work, because when we do it, then we can come back to our new identity. And if we don't do it, the script is going to run whether we want it or not.
Oh yeah. Sitting here in silence in awe of everything you said was how I was feeling. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I apologize for that.
No worries. It happens.
Can you enable the sharing again?
Oh, yes. I hope. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Um, okay. Here's
Yeah?
what I'm gonna do. Send you to the schoolishness session and private message Sonia because she has the ultimate host and can give you co-host. Are you okay with that?
Okay, run it by me again.
I'm going to send you to Anthony's session where Sonia is and private message her and ask to give you co-host.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
sorry. It's
No,
Zoom tech things as we were talking about.
yeah.
You can send me to do it if you need. Okay, never mind.
I think it has to be her because that person
Okay.
has to have co-hosts so that they can share themselves. Because I can share, but I don't have her slides. Weird settings that Zoom limits us on for some reason. Prysa will pay them like $50 a month for more host accounts.
I do know there's a way that you can give permission to anybody to share, but then you open it to anybody. But still, what happens is when somebody clicks share, the host still has to approve it if they're not a host.
Okay, that's good to know because I have
Oh,
been in sessions where Zoom bombers come in and share, and it's really
okay.
fairly traumatizing, but it must be this, like, that's why we don't enable anyone to share.
Yeah. Makes
But
sense.
it might be the specific settings.
I just know in a class I teach, people can share without, what am I trying to say? Without being a host. But
Yeah.
like I accidentally clicked share one time and it said, you need permission. And I was like, oops, it was an accident. So, but yeah, I've never been in where they were just able to with no permission. So that is scary.
Yeah, I've had it happen once and I was like, this is why we have all these security safety measures in place against this, as annoying as they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I Wanda. Okay. So when we're healing, really quickly, tools would be to observe, to name, to breathe, to visualize, to reparent, a lot of somatic work. And then we commute and commune. And we're doing all of those things. And just really quickly, I had a client that came to me with a whole bunch of anxiousness. She DM'd me and she was like, well, she DM'd me the first, she wasn't my client yet, but she's just like, I am having a really hard time because I'm sending my children to school. And then she tells me she's like, she's neurodiverse and she's breastfeeding. So she's also postpartum and she has 2 young children. And so she was like, it's really hard to get up in the morning on time and get the kids to school on time. And so somebody at her school scolded her in front of her child for being late. She was like, and so now every morning her daughter was like really, snapping because she's like, come on, mom, hurry up. She's like doing all that. And now her husband is mad. And so it's just like this spiral. I was like, can we just pause and be like, oh, you're a neurodivergent mother who is also nursing, who is also postpartum and getting your children to school. How badass is this? And this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk to your husband and he's going to back you up. And we're going to talk to your young child and be like, we're so sorry that you that you even experienced somebody shaming your parent. You should have never experienced that. And then we're going to talk to the administrator. We're going to talk to this. We're going to talk to all the people, and we're all going to get together and we're going to center our humanity, and it's going to be okay. Before we did it, we had to visualize it. She was like, huh? Like, this is really going to happen. And it did, right? We were able to do it. And then she took my cohort and we did, we worked together for a while, and she became a para in that school. And she started centering the humanity and started supporting the young people inside of that school. And she got in trouble. And somebody really bullied her, and she went back into that anxious child. And she was like, she called me, she texted me, can you call me? Can you call me? And I was like, okay, this is an emergency. She's like, I'm having an anxiety attack. I'm in the bathroom. Like, this lady, I stood up for a child, and she just she went at me, and she was just like, I just want to quit. I just want to leave. So I was like, okay, leave, right? And then we did this revisualization, and we went back and we said, what would it have felt like if your parents had advocated for you and defended you inside of school? Let's do that first. And let's visualize your educator responding to your parent. And now her parents were immigrants. And she was like, they would have never, because they didn't speak English. I was like, oh no, now the school went and got an interpreter. Right. And we created these things. I was like, we got to feel them in our body. So it's like, now when we feel in the body, I need you to email somebody over that teacher. And then you're going to visualize yourself, email it, and visualize the response. I won't go into, I'll wrap it up, but she has been offered a position 2 years into this process with the board as an advocate. And she was just like, I had anxiety. I could not even go into a school building and talk. It's the power of healing. It's the power of healing. So in doing this work, it's not just in service to our children, it's service to ourselves. It's in service to humanity, this work that we must do. Reframe, why are we here? Right? If we're not here for school, why are we here? If we're not here for productivity, why are we here? This is the fun part. Right? Giving ourselves a new identity. And part of how I see that identity is just like, you know what? My son taught me this as well. I remember I wanted to be like the most unschooling of them all when I was like, I'm rejecting all of these. I remember when he was around 9 or 11 or something, he was like, he was like, I think you're really smart, Mom. And I trust you. Like, you've gotten a job, you've gotten into college, like you have friends. And he's just like, I don't know. He's like, maybe I'm not self-directed. He was like, maybe I'm like learn from a lot of different people directed. And he's just like, I don't have a lot of self-interest. He's like, I don't even 100% know who I am. So how is everything about the self? I'm still developing myself. So even the pressure of thinking that he had to be self-directed was a lot. He was like, I'm still developing myself. And I am doing this this is a young person telling me this. I'm doing this in collaboration with you. I need some feedback, right? I need some guidance. Like, do this for me. Like, now stop making it about you and start making it about my humanity, our humanity, right? And so we need to know what that reframe is, right? We need to know, why are we here? Then we get to reinvent that and work in collaboration. So ultimately, the framework is about freeing up the bandwidth. Can y'all hear my phone ring? This is my child.
Yeah, we can hear it.
This is my child playing on Roblox. Roblox with their friend. This framework is about freeing up the bandwidth so that we can have room to create and ritualize and cultivate a more beautiful possibility. What does that look for you? Can you imagine it and can you feel it? So I remember, and this is like, it didn't exist, but I remember when I was younger and when I was like 27 and like I said, when I tell you I've lived through a lot, I've lived through a lot. And at 27, I was really, really broken. And I was like, I want a healed version of me. I just, and I didn't know how healed people or how people that were like healthier did. But in my mind, they wore silk robes around the house and like had house plants and listened to like different music that I was listening to and had like no acrylic nails. Like I just created this persona and I was just like, okay, what does a house feel like? Like, how do I respond to people when I'm angry? How do I do this? And I started to think about how the household, this is right before I had children, how that would look, how I would respond. And then I started thinking about what kind of parent I would be and how I would respond to those children that I was going to have. And I have done that. And still to this day, we go back in my house and we come back. And when we're off center, off compass, we're like, is the house feeling and it's not the house really, it's our relationship, right? When I say center home, it's not like you can live in a car. I've worked with parents that are like transient homeless. They're living in an extended like motel. And I use the same framework. I'm like, we got a center home culture. And they're like, I don't have a home. I'm like, you absolutely do in your body. Our relationships are our home, right? And so what do we want us to look like? When I walk in a room, I want my face to light up. When I wake up in the morning, I want to feel like, what am I going to do with all this future? I need that. I need my children to experience that. Because I believe when people experience this at their core, they will do whatever it is that they came here to do. But we have to experience that in a way that is ritualized and in a way that matters. And so new center, who's this? I know that my son is just like, I know we want to be like self-directed, but my son said to me, you have some things, I want to know them. I want to share them. And as a parent my mother was diagnosed with MS and she always felt that she was going to die. And so she raised me to be tough because she was like, you have to learn how to live without me. And then I'm like, I want to learn how to live. I want to remember what it was to live with you. When you center your story, that's what I wish you would have done. Right. And so I've reparented myself with my mother centering her and centering me instead of like, you might have to live without me. And so I'm always thinking if today was a day that I will be separate from my young people or my partner, what would I want them to know about me? Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have self-directed interests. It means that there are some things that I get to share. And then I also feel like if I was separated from my children today, what would they want to know about me? I mean, what would they want me to know about them? And so I'm always asking, like, one of the things that we can do in our homes is center each other's stories. It's not just our interests, it's our realities. Center each other's reality. Who is in your world in this moment? Who are your friends? What have you learned? Like, lean into that deep curiosity as to what would I want to share about my world, my experiences. I do it all the time. People are like, you really do directed literacy instruction? I'm like, yeah, and math, super directed all the time. Because to me, it's no different than sharing a family recipe for a cake. I'm like, this is how I learned math. When I was in chaos and living in a childhood traumatic like environment, a neighbor taught me math, and she was a pre-med student. And she said, you know what? I know that you have a lot going on. This is how I see math. You can take big problems that people don't understand and reduce them to one variable. And you can make out of something really complex, like you can reduce it and solve problems. And that's what algebra and then pre-calculus and calculus became, my ability to take big, hairy things, because I was a young person in a lot of stress. And the idea of solving big problems and having a brain that can do it and be calm became something that I really wanted to learn how to do. And so I was like, that's how somebody introduced math to me. And I'm introducing it to y'all because it's part of my story. It's an invitation. Now, do you have to do it when I tell you? No, but maybe you're not interested and you won't use it, but one day I'll be gone. And it's a part of my story. Do you want to learn how to share it to your children about their grandmother and their great grandmother? And so numeracy and literacy, the poems that we read, the things that we do is a part of our legacy. These things we were kept from these things by law. And we fought to be able to do them. Let's do them. It's not about the letters. Like, we need to learn the sound so we can do this other criticality piece, but it's a part of our legacy. It's not here to oppress us. It's here so that we can show up for other people and ourselves and our community. And so we center that. When I think about our homes, it's like home as acceptance, home as healing, home as belonging, right? Home as learning. Sometimes even when we're doing check-ins, let's say my son was mean to my daughter, or my partner was harsh to me, whatever, or I was doing, right? And we center, we visualize, we tap, we're doing all the things. What would have been a different response? Can we feel it in our bodies? We're doing visualization in real time. When I do something and my child is like, it's okay, mom, it's not a big deal. I'm like, oh, internal family systems. I'm like, oh no, there's something inside of you that's telling you that it was justified. Speak to that part. And I'll have my young children, my young people will like, I'm like, speak to that part and say, I'm sorry that you felt, you don't have to feel that way. It's okay to see me as an unsafe person in that moment. Like, we're repairing that, right? We're doing that in real time. They won't have to be 40 or 30 or in therapy. Do it in your home, a sense of belonging, leaning, storytelling, culture, accepting, disrupting, like home as epicenter of all of those things. I recently had, I posted a reel on Instagram that went viral. It was about equity, and like 1,800,000 people. So this is crazy. It went viral, and a gazillion emails. I mean, a gazillion comments, and a lot of them were really, really mean. And the more people that commented on it, it became something for my son and I to see. And I said, you know, what if, like, a lot of us don't know, even the people fighting for equity, we don't know what the answers are. We don't know how policy is written. We don't know how policy works. We don't know how government works. So what if, like, what kind of possibility would we be able to write if more of us understood how to write policy, more of us understood how schools were funded, more of us understood like the history of inequity and zoning? What world could we then co-create? And so where is that work being done but in our homes? Like, what are we doing with all this future day by day? And it's not about telling your children what they have to do, but creating the spaces that lean into humanity in such a way that they are compelled to participate. When my son tells me, I want you to tell me what to do, I want you to share, I have earned that. I am not entitled to that. I have earned it because we have done all of these things. And then we're doing it in collaboration. That's it. All work is self-work. Self-work is daily work. And rarely does self-work happen in isolation or under perfect conditions. As we can center our children's humanity, we ourselves are doing it. We give ourselves permission to live more authentically. We too expand. And this work is not just in service of our children. It is absolutely in service to ourselves and our families and the collective. That's it. So what are we going to do with all this future? How are we feeling? Anybody want to unmute and share what resonated, or that what they're staying with, or what was especially helpful, or any of that? Nice. Thank you so much. Yay.
I can share a little bit.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
And I resonated with so much of it. I also was a child who did really well. School was pretty easy for me, and I started college when I was 16. So a lot of that part of your story resonated, but my children who have never been to school, I think a lot about, like, they don't seem to be super academically inclined right now. I mean, they are in their own ways, right? As many of our self-directed kids are. Like, they go deep on the things they want to go deep on, and they don't have any of those schoolish notions around, like, this is when you do things, or that I need to do this now. But I think also about one of my children who has given me permission to share is dyslexic and dysgraphic. And so certain things are definitely developing on a different timeline, which leads us to have to do a lot, or me to have to do a lot of work on, like, what is this going to look like? Okay, so now he's 13 and, like, writing a paragraph is still really challenging. Like, how is this going to unfold for him? So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on sort of deschooling around those ideas when you do see that they're on their own trajectory.
Yeah, so my son is dysgraphic as well. Um, his reading and reading comprehension, bananas. His writing, completely still very challenging. And we have gone through 2 years of not writing, and he sees that blank page and he would be, and I have permission to share as well. It's really hard. He's just like, even he was like, well, he will do voice to text, but then he will do voice to text, but then he edits and he does all. He was like, so to write a paragraph might take him a long, long time. It is exhausting, right? And so, because our brains do not want to do things that make us feel like failures and that are difficult for us, there's avoidance there. I can only share what works with me, but I hold my baby in my arms when he's really hurt, and I affirm him. And then I'm like, I'm here to help, right? I'm here to, like, we need to do this. And it would be a disservice to you for me not to walk you and develop the skill, right? And it's no different than, like, I teach him to do online banking, or, to handle money. And I was like, it's no difference, right, than me saying internet safety and consent and all of these other things that I have had to walk you through and, like, be your guide. This is one of those things, and it is harder for you, but you chose me, and, like, we're like, you knew when you chose me that you're going to be this graphic at some like on an adequate level. You knew, and then you picked the mama that knows how to deal with it. So let's do it, right? And a lot of the things that he shared, like he walks me through a lot of things that are really, really difficult too for me. And so he is too my guide. And sometimes, and so I have to remind him of that. I'm like, yeah, I'm walking you through this, and you walk me through other things. And you walk me through those other things because I need them. And I'm going to walk you through these other things because you need them. And so that's, holding ourselves and reminding ourselves that we're not doing it from a deficit, we're doing it from a collaborative thing, and that we all have things that we have to do. Like I have anxiety around taxes, and I have a great bookkeeper, and I'm like, I go to her, and like for the first 15 minutes, we have to like regulate because I'm like so anxious, right? And I'm like, listen, she walks me through it. I have to pay her. You get me for free. So I'm like, we all have shit. This is yours. Let's do it. Let's do it together in collaboration because it's important, because you will have to write. And I have to file my taxes. Is that helpful?
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Although sometimes it's tricky if they're really like, I just don't want to do this, when you're in a self-directed mindset, to sort of decide how much to offer and how much to accept, that's not something they want to work on right now.
Yeah. We just have a lot of conversations around it. And then be like, and sometimes, honestly, I also walk them through, I don't want to do my taxes either, and do my bookkeeping. So, but it's because of my anxiety. So how much of this is you don't want to do it, and how much of it is your anxiety and a brain response that's telling you this is difficult. And so now I'm in rejection of it, right? And so that's a little bit of what's happening. So like being able to create some language around that and some trust is what works in my home.
Can I share?
Yeah.
First of all, I feel like your talk with us has been so liberating and created so much space and expansion. I feel like there's just no limit to what our brains are capable of, and like how the future is going to look, and we get to define that for ourselves. And I wanted to share a little bit about my son. We've never gotten him diagnosed, but he writes his numbers backwards. But we played this game last night, and part of the game is like you have to fill out a prompt and you have to write it down, but he doesn't write, he draws pictures. But and it's kind of amazing because it's like, I wouldn't be able to interpret what the pictures say, but he knows exactly what they mean. And it's a very like word specific game. So it's like kind of brilliant how he figured out how to be able to play the game with his skill set and his own mind. And it's like, that's the kind of future like that I feel like we can envision right now I'm envisioning right now after your talk, because it's like we don't have to limit ourselves to everybody has to be able to function in this way. Like if we let that go, it's like the ways that everybody functions is just like the way that they show up, and it's like such a gift to the world and to humanity, and we don't even know necessarily what that's going to look like yet, but it's like we're just like starting that process.
Yeah, like we get to write it. I'm so grateful that this was helpful and of service. I really am, and thank you for being here, and stay in touch. My son, and just really, my son is like, so what's challenging for my son, just so to give you a little background on dysgraphia, is like he has all of these thoughts and really well-constructed thoughts. But when he is trying to put that on paper, it's just really challenging for him and it's frustrating. And it's challenging for him in a way that it's foreign to me because I don't experience it. So, but that's what I've observed and that's what he has described. He's just like, I have such good thoughts. Why can't I put them on the paper? But he can write, he has great penmanship. It's not that. I'm on Instagram a lot. That's my main way at raising readers. And my website is From High Chair to Freedom.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
Like a little fangirl thing real quick. I'm actually on your text group, and I thought some other people in this chat might really appreciate you speaking to that and letting people know that that's an option for them too. Because that's
no, you can speak to that. I would appreciate you sharing that.
Well, if you follow her on Instagram, which was where I found it, if you go to her links, she just shares, or you just share very, I just sent it to Leah and Amanda, actually. I'm like, I just said she sends a lot of encouragement and information. And it's just, and I don't really respond to anything. I just look and I'm like, it helps me decenter. And if I'm having a rough day, or sometimes you share that you're having a rough day, and I'm like, okay, whew, I'm not alone. This is okay. Well, it's just nice. And so it's just something easy to have on your phone. We get text messages every day. So if you can get a text that's just like reminding you to decenter school and center your humanity, I would suggest anybody that's not already doing that to do that with you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's 3 times a week, about 3 times a week. I'm just like, reminder to breathe. Reminder to do this, reminder to do that. And I think we just forget that we have to do this work in community and with belonging. And sometimes like navigating these spaces is tough. And I would have like a lot of people in their DMs, especially during the pandemic, and we don't have access to mental health and like services. And I was just like, why don't I just text everybody so that we could feel a little less alone? And what does that turn into? And then it was like 50 of us strong for like 6 months. And then it was like 300. And then it was like 500. And it was just like, oh, so clearly, and it just kept growing. And then sometimes people like respond and sometimes they don't. And, we have to just remember, like, belonging is our biology, friends. Like, we're wired for this. And so.
And I think, sorry, go on, please.
No, I mean, that's really just why I created that. Like, people are like, why do you do it? I'm like, I don't even know. It feels good to me. Okay.
Well, it feels good to others. And I want to tell you, even if you don't get responses, we read it and we appreciate it.
Thank you. I feel like nobody, like a lot of times people don't respond. And then I'm like, just doing a check. Does anybody need to unsubscribe? And then people are like, no, leave me
no, please. Yeah, exactly. So it's good. Keep doing it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Is this all? Okay, we have a minute and a half left. Unmute.
Am I on mute or no? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I just wanted to offer one, I hope that you can give Nicholas this word of encouragement, that some of the posts that you write of what he says or the videos he posts have been my ultimate. I've been following you for about a year now. I literally have interrupted my spouse before at work to be like, this is what I want our kids to feel. This is what I want our kids to think like he is an inspiration to another mom, so like, I know he might be on his own journey for writing. It's taking him his own timeline, but the way he's communicating now in his videos, in his transcripts from his mama, he has such valuable things to communicate to the world. So I want him to know He is amazing.
I'm so inspired. I told him, I was like, I think that the creator gave you this graphia because it would be a competitive disadvantage to everyone if you had these thoughts and then you could write them really, really fast. Because he's really cool. I know I'm biased.
He's truly an amazing child, like an inspiration.
He's a thinker, and it's
Oh.
really, he'll say some stuff and I'll be like,
Yes.
let me write it down. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I will share that. I will share that. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that I came and I was able to share and spend this time with y'all.